Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So today, in terms of the hotness, I am diving into a literal volcano as I take a detailed look at Earth from Maxine Tardif and Inside Up Games. If you have not heard of this game's existence, then what cave have you been sealing yourself up in for the last few weeks? In terms of reviews, this game has been buzzed about like crazy. The hype factor for this game was already high when it was on Kickstarter and when it was just about to fulfill, but then when Dice Tower and various other channels have been giving out reviews for this, and I've seen nothing but 9s and 10s for this with barely a negative word said.
Everything is awesome.
My god, the train is soaring at high speed of everybody telling everybody how great this game is and how everybody needs to play it immediately. So naturally, as the self-proclaimed biggest curmudgeon of the board gaming industry on the internet, I need to give this one a look and see whether this game is justifying all that hype and one of the best games of 2023, or one of the most overrated titles of board gaming history. And in the interest of honesty, this is my own copy of Earth. I backed this on Kickstarter last year. I've paid my €55 or whatever it was for it, which to be fair is actually pretty cheap for a Kickstarter these days. And of course, this is my copy, my stuff. I'm giving it my own fair, honest thoughts here, so ladies and gentlemen, you ready for this? Over thousands of years of evolution and adaptation, the flora and fauna of this unique planet have grown and developed into amazing life forms, creating symbiotic ecosystems and habitats. Earth is an open-world engine builder for 1 to 5 players with simple rules but tons of strategic possibilities. The objective in Earth is to score as many victory points as possible. To do this, you will plant cards to create your own island, a 16-card tableau arranged as a grid 4 cards wide by 4 cards tall. The game ends at the end of a round after a player plants their 16th card, which completes their island. Players will take it in turns to trigger one of the actions on their player board, doing the top action for themselves and everybody else around the table conducting the bottom action. These actions allow players to plant cards and draw cards, but also gain various resources such as soil, composted cards and sprout cubes and tree trunks, which gain you points but also act as their own little sub-currency for card effects in the game. After the action is resolved, all players are then able to go through their entire tableau of cards from the top left to the bottom right, triggering all the abilities on those cards that correspond to the same colour of the action that was just taken. With a huge deck of unique cards, as well as a wide variety of objective scoring cards, and even personal setup cards for islands and climates, this game certainly has enough variety to make your engine as varied as possible. It's time to jump into these rich environments and create some amazing natural synergies that replicate and extrapolate on Earth's amazing versatility and plethora of natural resources. As with all nature games, you see the same stuff appear on the internet with regards to what to compare Earth to. The same ones get mentioned, and some of them make sense, some of them make no sense whatsoever. Here's my thoughts. Firstly, Ark Nova. People know this is one of my favourite Euro games, in fact one of my favourite games of all time. You're building a zoo, it's got lots of cards with photographic pictures on them, much like the ones in here, and of course people want to know if this is better than that. Look, Ark Nova is fundamentally different to this game. Yes, you both build up a tableau of cards in front of you, and that's about as much as the similarities end. I mean, assume they're all about nature, which they are. But Ark Nova has the action row mechanic, it's got a lot more like moving parts within it, it's got the spatial awareness of your map. You know, all of that is not present in Earth. Earth is a much lighter affair than Ark Nova, it's a much shorter affair than Ark Nova, and honestly, I wouldn't really even put the two in the same comparison. Now, Wingspan, on the other hand, this one does have more similarities to that. Both, again, involve you building up a tableau of cards. Each has cards with abilities that trigger off at different stages of the game, and you can make those various abilities more powerful, or make actions more powerful, by getting the right abilities in the right places. Even some of the factors of scoring here, the fact that every sprout you get is a point, well, so's eggs in Wingspan. Every card that you get in your compost is a point, well, so are tucked cards in Wingspan. And honestly, if you've played Wingspan, I feel that I can actually teach this game to you easier by just comparing concepts. However, with the two being similar, Wingspan is still probably a bit more streamlined than this game is overall in terms of its feel, and certainly I suspect from its look, it's definitely got a slight component upgrade over this one.
There'll be plenty of time to discuss your objections when and if you return.
Now, where I would compare this one to mainly is games such as Ares Expedition. Ares Expedition was a spin-off of Terraforming Mars where you chose a different action each round. You got one version of it and everybody else got a slightly less powerful version of it, and you were building up, again, a tableau of cards. You were getting icons and you were triggering abilities. You were building up an engine with essentially a deck of cards. You had the small like map thing in the middle, but it was kind of inconsequential really. It was mainly just about the cards. Honestly, when I played this, I was tying things back to Ares Expedition more, with elements of Wingspan thrown in. But I think the comparisons to Ark Nova just don't really fit the bill. You know, there's a lot of nature games that come out and naturally everybody wants to compare them to the same games over and over again. But if we're thinking logically about this, it's more closer to Ares Expedition than I think than Ark Nova and Wingspan, but there are definitely some similarities to Wingspan. Now, aesthetically, Earth is definitely a looker on the table. It's not glowing with component quality. There are some basics they have to do. I'm not a fan of these very fiddly little spindly soil pieces and sprout cubes. I mean, it's a cube, it's green, great, it looks the part. But then I do like these trunk pieces with the canopies on top. Some of them don't fit together brilliantly, but most of them do. And, you know, so the component quality is decent enough. Bear in mind, this game, cost like €55 when I put it on Kickstarter, delivered. That's cheap for a Kickstarter, you gotta give it credit. But where this game shines is the look of the cards themselves. The cards themselves are not the best of quality, they're standard quality. You may want to sleeve some of these cards, more on that in a second, but they use photography for all the pictures, and honestly, I think that's the best way to do it. People like to give photography a bad rap. They say, oh, you couldn't afford an artist, use photography.
Shut up, Wesley.
Excuse me? Most people can't draw a hyena, for example, as good as the photographers can, okay? You know, photography is a form of art. It is still a medium in this industry, okay? It works in Ark Nova, and although I think that uses a mix of art and photography, it's kind of weird. I think it's photography with a filter they use in Ark Nova. Here, it looks like it's basically pure photography. And it looks spectacular, okay? I look at Kyushu, is it Kyushu or whatever you pronounce it, the island here. I want to go visit this island. You know, the Atacama Desert, lovely picture. These different flowers and fauna and mushrooms and that. Everything looks beautiful. The camera's probably not doing justice to what I'm seeing in front of me right now. Just so much colour booms out of this game that it always turns heads as soon as anybody walks past, and that's not even including the cover, which is so gorgeous I want it on my wall. This is where the aesthetics of this game shine, even if component quality wise it's still built to a budget. The rules to the game are actually pretty straightforward as well. If you are teaching this to gamers are going to pick this up in no time at all, because we're used to a lot of these things like card abilities and these little rules about, oh, I could combo this with this and that and and this. You know, that sort of stuff comes naturally to us after playing games for a lot. And the rulebook itself is not particularly huge, and it certainly has a lot of pictorial representation and a lot of decent sized font. So for the most part, the rulebook does a good job. We'll get onto the solo rules a little bit later on, but for the most part, this is quite an easy game to learn the basics of how it plays. And if you want an even easier way to learn it, then just go check out Paul Grogan's Gaming Rules video via the QR code on here, and you get a 20-minute video that basically explains everything you need to know about the game. It really is a sound way to learn it. So getting to grips with the starting point of this game is really straightforward. Now, the complexity comes into triggering all these abilities. We'll get onto that a little bit later on, but the graphic design does a good job of making that a little bit easier to understand by not having a ton of text on the cards. Most of the text in this game is basically on some of the scoring objectives, and you kind of need the text in this part. But with all the cards that I've got down here, you've got flavor text at the bottom, which is good to learn stuff, but everything else is done by color banners with iconography. There's a lot of it, but you do have a resource guide on your board to help you with this, but it's not good for colorblind people. There's nothing in these abilities to distinguish them from each other. So you've got a red, a blue, a yellow, and a dark green ability, and then you've also got brown, and then you've also got black. So if you're colorblind, you're going to struggle to actually know which of these abilities is what.
Dog, pig, dog, pig, dog, pig, pig, loaf of bread, system error.
The game has an impressive amount of variety with the cards and everything. I mean, this deck here is all part of the cards, and I haven't even got it out of the pack to play a solo game here, for example. But you still have a bunch of cards here, and that's not even including this bunch of cards and this bunch of cards. Oh yeah, and the cards I've got down here, there's quite a lot in this deck, it has to be said. And on top of that, you've then got a lot of different island cards, which are your differentiated setups, except they're all double-sided. Same for the climate cards. These give you a special ability, and again, all double-sided. And then you've got a lot of these ecosystem cards, which you should really throw into every game, even in a beginner game. And again, double-sided, and these double-sided. There's certainly a lot of variation. Although, don't assume that just because there's a lot of variation, it's all entirely unique. There is a lot of repetition with some of these abilities. You may have one, for example, that says, if you can do a continuous line for your tableau only of sun habitats, you get this many points. There'll be one for sun, there'll be one for water, there'll be one for rock, and there'll be one for snow. And then another one, there'll be, 9 cards with a soil cost of less than 3. Less than 3. There's your objective. Turn it over and it's the exact opposite. Cards with a cost of more than 3 soil. So a lot of these abilities are varied, but there's basically a lot of reversals and a lot of, alright, just substitute this icon for this icon. Irv's party piece though is in regards to the lack of downtime in this game. This game has next to no downtime whatsoever, for the most part. We'll get onto that a little bit later, but with this game, because you trigger an action, everybody else gets to do the lesser action as well. So nobody's just sitting around waiting for an action to come round to them. But on top of that, you've got so many abilities on this tableau by the end of the game that you are constantly going, right, I need to do this action, right, I'll get this bit of soil, and then maybe I'll grab this canopy tree. Okay, cool. Right, go from the top left. Right, so I can discard one of those and get 2 of these, and then I can grab 2 of those, get another couple of these, we'll put those on there, and then that lets me draw a couple of cards. All right, I'll draw a couple of cards. Let's see, I've got to get rid of 3 of them into my compost. I'll take this one. Oh, I draw another 2. Compost, take this one. Get another cube, more soil. You have to kind of have your thinking cap on for this game, because this one makes you chain abilities and combos all the time, without rest. You don't get a chance to take 5 and have a breather. You will be doing your turn, triggering all these abilities, and by the time you've gone, right, that's good. Oh, next action. Oh my god, next one. And then rinse, repeat over and over again. You could have turns with a couple of actions to do. You could have a turn where you've got to trigger about 12 different abilities on your board. And you know what? For games where I tend to rag on them for having too much downtime, it's nice and refreshing to have something that keeps you engaged throughout pretty much the entirety of the game. But then this can lead on to a negative effect as well, which we'll get onto a bit later. But yeah, the claims that this game has little to no downtime are true. This one really does force you to just be constantly engaged.
You're going to burn in a very special level of hell.
Now try not to kill me with pitchforks at this point, people, because no game is ever flawless, no matter how much you love it. This is no exception, and there are a few caveats worth mentioning. Now, I mentioned before that the rules are fairly easy to learn. They are. But people are kind of coming out and saying that this game is really approachable to just about anybody. Just about anybody, you might want to be a little bit more specific on that. If you're a gamer, you will pick this up in no time at all. I mean, it took me no time at all to learn the rules to this game, and I've taught it to people pretty easily, but some people will get caught up with this. You have got to chain a ton of abilities by mid-game here. In the early game, it's not so bad, but once you've got half of this tableau filled, or 3/4 of it filled, you've got so much stuff triggering on this board that anybody who is not very good at processing abilities on cards is going to trip up and constantly, like, fall on their face here.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
You're waiting for certain players to be able to process all this stuff going on, and because it's relentless, that person doesn't get a chance to have a little breather, a little bit of like catch up. So those people need to be a little bit more hesitant about playing a game like this. Wingspan, for example, is a lot more streamlined. You don't have anywhere near as many abilities to trigger. You maybe have like 3 or 4 tops, and that's a good number, and not all of them are ones that you would trigger, and some of them are pretty straightforward anyway. Here, you've got up to 16 cards worth of abilities here. All the cards have some kind of ability on them. Yeah, some of them might have already had their effect, or they only trigger on certain times, but you've still got to go through this entire thing and process it. And I would not put this in front of anybody who is new to games or even remotely prone to analysis paralysis, because any AP player is going to grind this game to a halt. Anybody who is relatively new to games should stay away from this at all costs until you're comfortable with games, or games where you have card tableaus with triggering abilities. Never, if anybody tries to tell you this is a gateway game or something that they would teach to families or something, I'd be very wary about such claims. I know we gamers skew the weight of games here.
That's putting it mildly, 007.
Now, I have mentioned that this game does have little to no downtime, top marks. Do not confuse that for multiplayer interaction though. This game has none of it. There are 2 aspects of this game that has you caring about the other players, and even then, it is with a minimal level of care. Firstly, the action that you do on here. You can't gauge whether an action is going to be beneficial for others or not, other than potentially seeing that they have a low amount of soil to plant cards. But there are cards in here that cost cheap, so if they've got cards in their hand, chances are they'll have something they can play. So yes, there's little to no downtime as a result of this mechanic, but I'm not choosing my action based on other people, I'm purely doing it for me. The fact that what they've got on their tableau I don't care about. You won't be able to see what's on their tableau for the most part. You can pick out a growth cube, you can pick out a tree that's sticking out of the cards, but you have no way that you could have Zumo vision to read the text and abilities and all that stuff on these cards and make any kind of influential decision on your action based on what they are doing. On top of that, the only other minor bit of interaction are these brown objective cards, where it's a milestone like terraforming Mars. But again, how on earth can you possibly gauge whether you're anywhere close to that race or not? Okay, I have to get 3 or more black abilities, right? Well, okay, that's a little bit easier to tell on certain people's boards, but then 10 cards with an even victory point value. Yeah, unless you're going to go around other people's tableaus and take photos with your mobile phone, there is no way you can gauge whether somebody's got 8, 9, 7, whatever of even victory point cards. The text is too small and there's just too much on the table going on for you to make those kind of judgment calls. So it just ends up being kind of random when these milestones get done, you know, these particular milestones here. It just happens. It's not like I'm going, oh, we were so close in that. No, it's just a case of, oh, you've done it now. All right, cool. All right. Oh, you've done that one. All right, fine. Right, I've now done this one. It's not exactly interaction, is it, people?
I beg to differ, sir.
And you may think, well, how does that differ from Wingspan and Arc Nova? Wingspan is easier to tell what people have on their boards because it's clearer on the cards, not to mention it's a lot quicker to look at. Arc Nova, I can glance at anybody else's tableau in Arc Nova and instantly calculate how many icons they have of a particular type because they stand out. They're big, they're colourful, they're distinguished. I got no idea what VP values everybody has on their growth bits, or, you know, I can't count everybody's sprout cube at the other end of the table. That's not going to happen, but I can in other games. And so with the player count, it means little to no downtime, great, But you could play this with 2 players or 5 players, and the gameplay is still exactly the same, except that when you have less players, you don't have the problem as much of your lowest common denominator making the game slower for you. If you've got 5 players in this game, be very wary, because there's a lot of cards out there, a lot of people grabbing for stuff, and even then, you might be thinking, well, I've done all my abilities fine, but then somebody else over there might have quite a lot of abilities to trigger and isn't very good at processing them very quickly. So there's no downtime with the action per se, but once you've done your abilities, you might have to wait a little bit for that person to hurry up with their abilities, and if they're slow, it's going to drag the game out. This game does have a little bit of fragility to it with regards to increasing the player count. You can play it with more, fine. There's pretty much no reason to, though.
5 is right out!
There is certainly quite a bit of luck in this game as well. I mean, it's more approachable, it's an easier game, it's not as complicated as some of those other ones, so naturally you're going to have to expect a bit of card draw luck. But in this one, you have quite a bit of it compared to some other games. You can potentially draw a lot of cards and have a lot in your hand, but these objectives are pretty specific as to what they want. And sometimes you just get lucky or unlucky at trying to fulfill them. You know, one ability might have 3, you want you to get 2 multicolor abilities. 2 doesn't sound like a lot. I played a game where 3 other players could not find multicolor abilities. I couldn't get 2 until the late game. Somebody was able to get about 6 or 7, and some others never saw a single one in the game no matter how many cards they drew. And that's for an easy objective. Other ones here where it's like, I need 10 cards with an even VP count. Okay, well I'll draw a bunch of cards. Well, let's see, I mean that's even, that's odd, odd and odd. Okay, so I found 2 out of 6 cards, and then I find, oh wait, but I can't play that because it's too much soil, or if I play that, that hurts me in other respects. And even with like some of the ability ones, like I need red abilities and you just can't find them. I need ones with geographical names and I just can't find them, and that can be slightly annoying. You can't get too attached to your cards though, and that's one of the tactical opportunities of playing this game. But yeah, if you're not comfortable with card luck, people complain about it in Arc Nova, it's a warranted pushback. People complain about it in Wingspan, it's a warranted pushback. The same applies here though. You cannot give those 2 games grief and not give this game the same amount of grief. Now, does the luck aspect kill the game? No, because the game is short enough that that luck aspect does not hurt as much in, say, something like Arc Nova. As much as I love that game, I gotta admit, it's a 3-hour Euro game and the luck can have a trigger effect. But I tend to find that I can get past it and mitigate it in other ways. Here, you can mitigate it in other ways as well, and because a lot of stuff scores you points, if you're not doing quite as well with the cards, you should be able to do well on other aspects. Although, not doing the objectives is kind of asking to lose the game, really. I mean, you can score like 40 to 45 points on this with with doing 3 of the 4 objectives pretty well or pretty quickly. That's not an insignificant amount of points when your score is somewhere between the 180 to 240 mark. The difference of going, well, I get a couple of growth cubes, fine, 2 points, not a big deal. Getting 40 odd plus points for those objectives though, you can't really ignore them, and if luck basically dictates that you can't have the cards you want for them, it hurts.
Well, this time John Wayne does not walk off into the sunset with Grace Kelly.
So to quickly touch on the solo mode basically has you play against Gaia, an AI opponent. You play your game pretty much exactly as you normally would, with the slight tweak that the actions that you do at the top of your board have an effect that attributes to the AI. The AI has their own board, and basically, whenever they get soil or composted cards or growth cubes or the different tree trunks, they basically just put them on their board and it gives them a bunch of points. Although this may look kind of bare bones to you, that's because it wants you to put all the trees on separately and all the cubes on separately. Do not do that. That's fiddly as all get out. Just cap with a canopy once it's got filled and use 1 cube to track the number of sprout cubes it has, not every cube in the box, okay? It just gets ridiculously fiddly at that point. But it's a very simple AI. It basically is a timer. You have effectively minimum 12 turns, depending on whether you go on beginner or expert difficulty. It has a small deck of 6 cards, 2 of which pertain to the objectives, and the other 4 pertain to the different color actions. You shuffle it, you flip a card, and you resolve part of it, and Gaia gets the other bit. and this goes through twice, and if you haven't finished by the time this deck runs through twice, that's the game end. Otherwise it ends when you complete your grid. In beginner mode, you skip Gaia's turns a couple of times, so you probably get somewhere in the region of about 16 turns in the game, but if you play on expert mode, you probably only get 12 max. And I wish it wasn't quite so time constrained, but in beginner mode, you tend to finish your grid, or at least have a decent grid by the time the game finishes. Now, the rules for the solo mode aren't quite as good as the normal multiplayer one. There's definitely an FAQ for this somewhere, but I think the rules in here, with regards to explaining Gaia's actions, are written quite poorly in some respects. It's not particularly clear how it works, and there's one aspect with regards to like how Gaia responds to the actions you take that's written incredibly poorly, in fact to the point where I think it's wrong. Now the solo mode plays very well. Easy to pilot the AI, challenging, even on beginner mode. In fact, I dare say expert mode is probably too punishing actually. But on beginner mode, you will lose some games and you will win some games. And you get to do all the cool stuff you normally do in the multiplayer game, just with a slight time constraint. But yeah, I really enjoy playing this as a solo mode more than multiplayer. You know, yes, you get lack of downtime in multiplayer, but again, like I said, it doesn't matter who's there at the table because you have no care what it is they're doing. So you might as well just use Gaia, frankly. But I get to use the objectives, the ecosystems, have my own island and climate, and do whatever I want with this grid and the cards. Just with a couple of little tweaks as to what I'm doing for Gaia, because you don't want to give her high VP cards and stuff like that, and the more you gain, the more Gaia gains. It's pretty cool system, and yeah, honestly, if I was to choose how I want to play Earth primarily, I'd probably play it solo more than multiplayer.
This is why Superman works alone.
Where Earth truly sings is all this ability triggering down here. All these things of going, right, I can pay this to get this, do this to get this, this gets me a bunch of soil, this gets this. It feels fulfilling and satisfying. And because the theme is something more appealing than, say, pay coal to get iron or whatever, like something from Furnace, here with the nature theme and the photography that just pops off the table, all the ability triggering just feels fun. It's had a lot of buzz, it's had a lot of praise, and there's certainly pros and cons to talk about, but I gotta give credit where credit's due. I really do enjoy this game, subject to those caveats I've mentioned. I'm giving Earth a well-deserved distinction level 9 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10 level. Those problems that I've mentioned do drop it down a mark. I do think the solo rules should have been written better. It is fully multiplayer solitaire, and I wish there was at least a little bit of care that I had for other players at the table, because I kind of just want to bring this out for myself and occasionally for other players, maybe like 1 or 2 more, rather than ever wanting to bring this out with 4 and certainly never 5 again. Yeah, there's little to no downtime, but there's just too much going on, too much triggers going all over the place, and too many people to wait for that. Playing this multiplayer with 4 or 5 just doesn't seem worth it. But a great solo mode, a great gameplay system, and just a nice appealing theme and a simplicity level of setup and takedown that is unparalleled in most games these days, definitely gives this game a distinction level rating. This is in no way going to replace any of the other games that I've mentioned that I love already. This is not a replacement for Wingspan, okay? They're different enough. Wingspan is a bit more streamlined in terms of its abilities and stuff going on, and it certainly probably is a bit more visually appealing, but Wingspan feels different enough from Earth that I would happily have both of them on my shelf. And in no way does this, like, you know, replace something like Ark Nova. Ark Nova is so fundamentally different to this game, and it's one of my favorite games ever, that Ark Nova is easily gonna surpass Earth for me, you know, but it's a different enough game that you shouldn't really even compare the two. Now, where I mentioned Ares Expedition before, yeah, I wasn't exactly that amazed with Ares Expedition, but frankly, Ares Expedition might as well be trashed at this point, because that's the game I compare more to this one, and this one just completely creams it in every way, shape, or form. So, you know, some of you might disagree with some of the comparisons I'm making to the games here, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on some of those, you know, particularly if there's other games I haven't mentioned, but overall, Earth is a really great game. Now, I don't think that you should be ignoring some of those flaws that I mentioned. You know, a lot of people aren't saying anything bad about this game, and I think that's doing a disservice. Earth is an excellent game. It's a distinction level. Just bear in mind those caveats I mentioned and see if this is the game for you. But for me, it's on my shelf, and it's going to stay there for some considerable time. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please remember to thumb it up on YouTube, but also thumb it up on Board Game Geek. Let's see if we can get it into the hot review section if possible. But until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including reviews I have done for Tenpenny Parks, Orichalcum, Goblin Vaults, and so much more. But take care, and remember, as always, regardless of which of the nature-themed games out there you're interested in, whether it's Wingspan, Nova, Earth, or the plethora of others, just remember, regardless of which ones you love and hate, they're still only games, so take care, and bye for now.